Most business owners ask the wrong first question about trusts. They ask, should I have a living revocable trust or an irrevocable trust? The better question is, when you can no longer run this company, whether by death, incapacity, or simply choosing to step back, what must remain true about ownership, control, liquidity, and family dynamics for the enterprise to keep its value? Because the structure you choose either preserves optionality and continuity, or it quietly transfers risk to the next generation and to the balance sheet. Today, we examine irrevocable trusts versus living revocable trusts, specifically through the lens of a business succession. Not theory, trade-offs. Control versus protection. What each structure does to your decision rights while you're alive, and what it does to people who inherit the responsibility after you. So what is a living revocable trust? A living revocable trust is a legal arrangement you create during your lifetime. You are typically the grantor, the trustee, and the primary beneficiary while alive. You transfer assets into the trust, real estate, investment accounts, and in many cases, membership interest or shares in your operating company. Because it's revocable, you can amend it, restate it, or revoke it entirely. You keep full control. You could sell assets, change beneficiaries, add or remove trustees, and adjust distribution terms. The key characteristics that matter for business owners are the assets remain in your taxable estate. For 2026, the federal estate and gift tax exemption sits at $15 million per person. That's $30 million for a married couple. Anything above that faces a 40% federal rate, plus any state, estate, or inheritance tax that applies in your jurisdiction. Creditors and judgment creditors can generally still reach these assets because you retain control and beneficial interest. Upon your death or incapacity, the successor trustee steps in without court supervision. Probate is avoided for properly funded assets. Management of the business interest can continue under the terms you already set. It is excellent for incapacity planning. If you become unable to act, the successor trustee already has authority. No guardianship proceeding required for the trust assets. In short, maximum flexibility and continuity of management while you are alive. Now we come to the irrevocable trust. An irrevocable trust is different in kind, not just degree. Once you transfer assets into it and the trust becomes irrevocable, you generally cannot take those assets back, change the beneficiaries at will, or rewrite the core terms without court approval or the consent of the beneficiaries. And even then, only in limited circumstances. You give up legal ownership, and in properly structured cases, beneficial control. A trustee, often independent or co-trustee, holds legal title and manages according to the trust instrument. Why does a business owner ever do that? Because removing assets from your estate can produce 3 durable effects. Number 1, estate tax reduction. This is growth after the transfer occurs outside your taxable estate. Number 2, creditor and lawsuit protection. Personal judgments against you typically cannot reach properly transferred trust assets, subject to fraudulent transfer rules and state laws, of course. Number 3, controlled succession. You can lock in rules for who can own the business interests, under what conditions, how voting control is exercised, and how liquidity events are handled for decades. Common vehicles high net worth owners use include intentionally defective grantor trusts, grantor retained annuity trusts, and spousal lifetime access trusts. The technical details matter less than the structural reality. Once the ownership sits inside the irrevocable trust, the next generation's rights and the company's continuity rules are no longer subject to your later change of mind. A second marriage, a lawsuit, or a poorly drafted will. The cost is real. Loss of unilateral control and reduced flexibility as circumstances change dramatically. Now let's look at the trade-offs that actually matter for succession. Let's put 2 structures side by side on the decisions that determine whether a business survives intact. Control while living. Revocable, you keep it. You can still vote with the shares, sell the company, change the succession plan next year. Irrevocable, you largely surrender it. The trustee follows the document. If you want to pivot strategically or change who ends up with what voting control, the path is narrow or even closed. State tax exposure. Revocable, assets stay inside the $15 million exemption calculation. Growth continues to count against you. Irrevocable, properly structured transfers can remove both the current value and future appreciation. For a business expected to compound significantly, this difference compounds too. Asset protection. Revocable offers almost none against your personal creditors or divorce claims. Irrevocable can create meaningful separation, critical for owners in high liability industries, those with personal guarantees, or those concerned about future litigation. Probate and privacy. Both avoid probate when funded correctly. Both keep the terms of distribution private. The difference is secondary. Succession mechanics. This is where most owners underprepare. With a revocable trust, the successor trustee can manage the business interest after your death, but the economic ownership still passes accordingly to the trust terms and is subject to estate tax if the overall estate exceeds the exemption. Family members or key employees may still face liquidity pressure to pay taxes or equalize shares among heirs who do not work in the business. With an irrevocable trust that already holds the equity, ownership has already moved. Voting and economic rights can be separated. Buy-sell provisions, right of first refusal language, and distribution standards can be locked in while you still have leverage and clarity. The next generation inherits a governed structure rather than an open question. The risk of the revocable path is that the structure you intended evaporates under tax pressure, creditor claims, or family disagreement after you are gone. Neither is better. One preserves your present decision rights at the cost of future exposure. The other reduces future exposure at the cost of present decision rights. There is a decision framework for business owners. Ask these questions in order. Is the current value of your taxable estate, plus expected growth over the next decade, likely to approach or exceed the exemption, currently that $15 million individual or $30 million joint? If yes, the tax math starts favoring irrevocable planning for the business interest. How material is a personal lawsuit or creditor risk to the survival of the enterprise? High personal exposure argues for moving ownership into a protected structure earlier. How important is the ability to change the succession plan in the next 5 to 10 years? If the next generation is unproven, or if a sale remains a live option, revocable flexibility has high value. Do you need the business interest to provide liquidity or income to a surviving spouse while still locking in long-term ownership rules for children or key employees? Hybrid designs, like spousal lifetime access trusts, for example, can address this, but they are irrevocable by nature. Are you prepared to live with an independent or co-trustee relationship for the core equity? Many owners discover too late that they dislike shared control. More sophisticated plans use both. A revocable living trust handles personal assets, real estate, and day-to-day flexibility. Carefully designed irrevocable trusts hold the concentrated business equity and growth assets once the owner has clarity on long-term intent. The mistake is treating the choice as binary, or as the one-time document exercise. It is a capital structure decision with multi-decade consequences. So what now? What should you pay attention to next? The structures themselves are tools. The quality of the outcome depends on 3 things that rarely appear in marketing materials: accurate valuation and timing funding of the business interest. An unfunded or poorly valued trust solves nothing. Alignment between the trust terms and the operating agreement or shareholder agreement. Conflict between those documents creates litigation risk precisely when continuity is most needed. Clear-eyed assessment of the next generation's readiness and the liquidity needs of non-participating heirs. Trust language cannot manufacture management competence or cash that does not exist. If your current plan still has the operating company sitting in your personal name or in a purely revocable structure, the implication is straightforward. The continuity and protection you believe you have may be thinner than you think once real stress arrives: tax, lawsuit, incapacity, or even death. That is the signal worth acting on. Not fear, preparation, and decision advantages. Review the actual documents, map the ownership chain, stress test the succession language against the scenarios that would threaten the enterprise. Then decide which trade-offs you are willing to accept while you still hold the decision rights in your hands. This is the work.